What's up guys, Project Photography back in another video, and today people we're going to be doing a Nikon Z6 review, but long term and from a landscape photographer's perspective. I'm mainly doing a review of this camera from the perspective of a landscape photographer, not an overall review, because there's a lot of reviews on that online. There's a lot of reviews where people have gone over the specs and whatnot, so I'm not going to be going over that today. My main concern with this camera is how it operates and functions for landscape photography specifically. Well, let's go over the reason why I picked a Z6 over a Z7. A lot of people will be wondering that. The Z7 is geared more towards landscape photography with that high megapixel sensor of 45 megapixels versus the Z6 of only having 25. And with more megapixels might come better dynamic range and things like that. So why would I pick a Z6 over a Z7? The main thing is price, because simply the Z6 was cheaper. I don't regret that decision because honestly, more megapixels to me does not equivalent to either better photos, and I just don't need more megapixels. It makes my workflow a lot slower. I don't necessarily have the most memory on my computer, and this just seemed like a better fit. I have been using this thing since around March, so that's around 9 months, give or take, about 9 or 10 months that I've had this thing. I've been solely just using this camera. I had a D600 Nikon before, that was a DSLR, now moving to mirrorless, and I have a lot of great things to say about this camera. The first big difference between this and the D600 is weight. This thing is actually way lighter than the D600. No surprise there because it is a mirrorless. So that's honestly a big thing, because weight when it comes to landscape photography is huge. When I'm gonna go hiking 5, 6, 7 miles plus, definitely want the most lightest kit possible, because with that I'm able to carry for longer durations of time without it getting uncomfortable, and this does the trick. And you might say, yeah, but the lenses are the thing that really makes it heavier now, and which that is true. I had a 15 to 30 Tamron before this 20mm Nikon, and the thing with that is I sold it because it's just too heavy and it's just impractical for me to carry on that huge log everywhere. And for lenses, I just have this bad boy right here, which is a 20mm f2.8. Great lens, very cheap. And I also have the 70-300 right here for landscape. I don't necessarily have the most heaviest gear, so coupling those two light lenses with this body is absolutely perfect. So from switching over from the D600 to this bad boy, the ergonomics felt completely the same. This thing does have a very, very good grip. That's one thing I really love about it. It just feels very good in the hands. It's a very nice grip. All the buttons and controls are virtually the same. The EVF is absolutely stellar, even though I never really use it for landscape specifically. The joystick is definitely very helpful. Not necessarily for landscape, but just in general. The menu systems are the same, and it's just the same overall Nikon feel that I just love so much. So ergonomics, definitely a plus, especially when you're going from a Nikon system. Having that optical viewfinder from the D600 and moving to an EVF, this thing is absolutely incredible. You don't even feel the difference switching from it, because you're going from an optical viewfinder, which you see everything how it is, to say an electronic representation of that, and it just feels so seamless. That's a great thing I love about the Z6. You can integrate it with your Nikon system very easily, whether using an SLR system or purely the mirrorless system. Another thing I really like about this camera is having that silent shutter. That thing is absolutely incredible, especially on this camera. I'm not going to be panning or doing anything crazy, so silent shutter really just reduces the shutter shock. Even though this thing really had a very dampened shock in the first place, having that silent shutter definitely helps a lot to reduce that fully and completely. There's not even a thing anymore. It's a thing of the past, and it's just extremely helpful to have. So big plus for silent shutter. One thing that I actually like about Nikon over other cameras in general is just the color contrast, how the files come out of it. I feel like these are definitely my favorite files to edit. I've used Fuji, Sony, Canon, a few others. I've used Panasonic too, and I just love the files that come out of this, and that's one thing I can really trust with the Nikon. Just the files that come out of this are absolutely incredible. You just have to see for yourself. It just feels different. There's just something about it that I really like. That's mainly why I have Nikon over any other system. I've tried to switch systems before. I just always come back to Nikon because just the files just don't look the same. Nikon definitely takes a W in that box for me. Another thing when it comes to image quality is just this thing has insane dynamic range. I shoot all of my photos at 50 ISO or base 100, and just everything that comes out of this is absolutely incredible. I pretty much shoot all my photos to expose for the highlights, and then I bring up the shadows in post, and I virtually see almost no grain. I have to really zoom in to see the grain. The files just come out insanely clean, and it's just such a joy to shoot with. Knowing that I'm able to shoot for the highlights and just bring up the shadows after is just absolutely insane. Before, you'd have to carry around graduated filters, but with this system you don't need that anymore, and it's just less gear I have to carry and just honestly easier overall. Yeah, insane dynamic range. Another thing about the ergonomics is that this thing has a flip screen. Super helpful, especially for landscape photography, because most of the time I'm shooting down low, getting that lower angle, and I don't want to have to like crouch down to see the LCD if I can just go ahead and flip it up. It's super easy. And with my D600, I would pretty much like set it low and then have to pretty much guess what my composition was going to be, and that's honestly a hassle, because then after I have to either crop or just keep on guessing and shoot the right photo, hopefully, but then that never is really consistent. So being able to just flip the screen down and just look at it from the bottom is super helpful. So another big thing is that this thing is weather sealed, and this camera having weather sealing is absolutely crucial to me. I can't imagine having a camera that doesn't have weather sealing, mainly because I'm in the outdoors 90% of the time, shooting stuff and landscapes and whatnot, taking this thing through the rain. This thing has been hit by waves on beaches so many times, and it works perfectly. It's very good in that aspect. Almost equivalent to the D850, which I know had insane weather sealing. This thing is pretty much on par to it. And I can have the utmost confidence that this thing is going to survive absolutely anything. Even with an adapter, it does have weather sealing, which is absolutely crucial because all the lenses I use are adapted. I just know that if I go out in the rain or in any condition, that this thing is gonna be perfectly fine. Now I talked about things that I like. I have to go on to things that I don't like, and unfortunately there are just a few things. The first part is when I'm using self-timer mode on this camera and then I turn it off and then I turn it back on, it doesn't stay on the self-timer mode. And I am not really sure why it does this, but that's just something I kind of have to work around. I really don't know why it does that, but if I even shoot like continuous high for my drive mode and then turn it off, turn it back on, it'll still be in continuous high. But for some reason, just the self-timer mode does not do that. I don't know why that's a thing. It is kind of annoying when I'm shooting landscapes because that's what I'm using most of the time rather than a shutter remote, because that's just less gear I have to carry on, and it practically does the same thing. I feel like that's something that's easy that could be fixed. That is kind of a little annoyance, but it's not a huge deal. Something you just gotta deal with. The other alternative is just to keep the camera on, keep shooting, but I really don't want to keep the camera on when I'm not using it, even though this thing does have insanely good battery life. But there's just a few things like on my wish list that I'd want for a mirrorless camera, or especially just for a landscape camera. The first one is that it doesn't have a vertical flip screen, it only has a horizontal flip screen. So I can't flip it up like this. And you'd be surprised how much I shoot vertical landscapes. Just if the composition warrants it, whatnot, then I would obviously be able to use that, but it just doesn't have that like the Fujis do. It'd be really nice to have that. I doubt Nikon will ever do that, but it would just be really nice. Another thing is that this camera can only go to 30 seconds exposure. It does have a time mode, but then that would mean having to pull out your phone, using a timer, things like that. Don't really want to deal with that. The Fujis, I know the XE3 for example, has that feature where you're able to set it to higher than 30 seconds for exposures. I know you can go like a minute, 2 minutes. It'd be really nice to see that integrated in the Nikon, but that's just wishful thinking. That's what I would want on my wish list. Don't know if that's gonna ever happen, but so far, I absolutely love this camera. I really have nothing but good things to say about it. I know when reviews came out initially, people were kind of trashing on this camera. The fact that it has one card slot, the autofocus wasn't as good. But after the firmware update, I think like 2.0, the autofocus became much better. I just use this in pretty much a dynamic area if I ever need autofocus. The one card slot thing does kind of suck, but it's not that big of a deal because to me, XQD cards are so robust and they're just tanks when it comes to memory cards. So I really don't have that fear of my cards failing on me. Yeah, I think the reviews definitely did not do it justice. And if you really want to go out and use this camera, I highly recommend it, even just for anything. I use this primarily for landscapes, but this thing could definitely be used for like journalism. This could definitely be used for portraiture, things like that. So yeah, absolutely love this camera to death. I can't see myself getting rid of it anytime soon just because of how versatile it is and how just stellar it works just in general. So I hope you found this review extremely helpful. I really hope you can take some things from it, especially from a landscape photographer's perspective. I know a lot of the things I raved about are similar in other mirrorless cameras, but I think just the fact that this has that Nikon color, that Nikon image quality to it, just to me takes it all. Because I know a lot of cameras have flip screens and do all this other kind of stuff. To me, this camera really feels like something I'm comfortable with and really at home with. And if you're in that same boat of that Nikon user kind of space, I think this camera will fit just right in. So let me know what you guys think of this camera. Let me know what you guys think of this video and just all of that. So yeah, that's it for this video. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section down below, and I will catch you guys in the next one.